For our next segment, I'd like to introduce Nicole Capretz, Executive Director of Climate Action Campaign and a primary author of the City of San Diego's draft Climate Action Plan.
Thank you all so much for being here. I want you guys to know that I just came from another event just like this down in Hillcrest in the City of San Diego with about the same size crowd. So for me, as a person going from one event to the other and seeing the same enthusiasm for climate planning and wanting to make a difference is really inspiring. So this is good stuff. Thanks, you guys. So my background, just because Diane kind of gave her aha moment, is I used to work for Councilmember Don Fry in the City of San Diego. And so most folks probably know, pretty progressive voice on the council. And one of the issues that Scripps came to us with, because we managed the environmental committee for the city, was the city has to do something about climate change. But we didn't really, okay, what is that? This was back in probably at least 10 years ago, probably 2003, 2004. And by the way, these are like internationally known scientists that we've never connected with before at the city, right? Which is a challenge in and of itself, or kind of an aha moment. Like here we have the world famous climate scientists in our backyard, and yet we've never talked to them before, and because we were the decision makers in the city of San Diego, the 8th largest city in the country. So they came to us and said, we really want to talk to y'all about climate change, because all the data is showing that this is like probably the most urgent story in human history, period. The biggest threat to humanity. Life support systems are at risk. You guys need to be doing something. So we said, okay, of course, yeah, heck yeah, come on in. So they came to the committee, and after the scientist came, his name is Dr. Richard Somerville. He has since won a Nobel Peace Prize for his work on climate change. So he is going to the Paris climate talks, and he's part of the International Panel on Climate Change. So truly, like a pioneer in this field. And he came to our city committee hearing. I was a consultant, and he got about a minute's worth of attention from our elected officials at that hearing. Very few people would listen to him, and the reaction of some of our elected officials was, "Who cares? What can we do? What can we do? It's all about China." It's just a very hands-off approach, and we're not really the problem, are we? So it was for me. It was a click that we needed to do something. It was like here were probably some of the smartest people on the planet in our backyard telling us to do something, and we basically brushed them off. It was embarrassing for both Donna and me to see our colleagues kind of treat them that way. So I've been working, really hard on moving forward with climate planning since then. And I basically had the incredible opportunity when Councilmember Todd Gloria became the mayor of the City of San Diego for 6 months, who basically said, you have 6 months, you've been nagging me about climate planning for 2 years. Here's your office, here's your staff, here's the resources, do not come out until you have a finished product. Because we have 6 months here, make your time work. So we did, and that's truly shows what can be done in a short amount of time and with the right people who have the right motivation. I cannot overemphasize that. I've had a lot of experience both inside and outside of government. You have to have a champion inside government, as well as obviously all of us as the outside watchdogs, kind of pushing our elected officials to do the right thing, as well as giving them the cover and the confidence to know that they're doing the right thing. So one of the biggest questions that came up when we started working on the city's climate plan was, so is this an enforceable document or not? What's the standard we're going to use for this climate plan? It's the most critical question that every city staff or elected official will think about. Because the City of San Diego staff wanted to make sure the city plan was not legally binding, was not enforceable, was basically just an aspirational document, just kind of a feel-good target that the city would hit that they didn't have to meet, but they try. They really try, which means they do nothing. Right? So it's a threshold question. If there's anything I'd want you to come away with today, is that making the plan legally binding is the only thing worth doing. It is worth dying on your sword to make your climate plan in your city legally binding. So here's how it goes. So as Dan mentioned, all climate plans, in every city provide a roadmap to achieve greenhouse gas reductions. Fantastic. Do they all conform with California laws and regulations? Yes. But here's the little twist here. California law does not legally require cities to reduce their carbon emissions. Our state as a whole is required to reduce our carbon emissions, but every individual city has a target. It's not a legally binding target. And savvy city staff members know this. and they rely on that. But here's where I'm happy to say some of my environmental friends figured out that we had something to push back. When and if cities are updating their general plans, right? So the general plans are the long-term roadmap for growth and development in a city. They're basically the Bible of how cities are gonna look in the future. Usually they go out for about 30, 35 years. If the city in the last 10 years has updated the general plan, they are required to do climate plans. Best of all, those climate plans are required to be enforceable. They're required to have legally binding targets, which means all the strategies that they are outlining to hit those targets have to be met. Which really means, bottom line, if you really want to know how city government thinks, which means they have to fund it. Which means that they have to divert resources that they have going one place, where's my pen? Divert resources they have going one place into implementing this plan. And that's really why you get the pushback, right? Because everyone has their own agenda, from city staff to elected officials. And they don't like you coming in and telling them where they're going to spend their money. They like to determine that on their own. So, what's key here, I know we're going to have a longer time to talk about this, but just so you get kind of at least a first brush idea, that having the general plan updated within the last 10 years, California law requires cities, then that's the hook to get climate plans to be legally binding. Next slide, please. So here's the California law. Again, don't worry about understanding the details or memorizing the details. This is just an overview. But I think most people are familiar with AB 32, which was passed by Governor Schwarzenegger, our Green Republican, who, to his credit, always have to give him credit, did set levels, in concert with the legislature, to reduce our greenhouse gas levels to 1990 levels by 2020, and the state has taken a lot of action on that. Then he took a step further, because also he was hearing from script scientists and others, like, that is not enough, not even close, that we needed to plan out to 2050 and go 80% below 1990 levels. And I'm happy to report, I don't know if some folks saw, but our governor, Brown, just set an interim target of 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. And this is why. These governors take these actions because it's not just city staff who resists, it's state staff, right? So you're talking all these government institutions who are basically saying, maybe, they kind of look at the first executive order by Schwarzenegger as something they don't necessarily have to comply with, but it's a good target, it's a good aspiration. And so our governor said, no, it's not an aspiration, you need to take action. And so that's why he set an interim target as well. It's basically a way to sort of jolt not only the institutions in California, but also jolt the elected officials, especially elected officials in Sacramento, who are setting the state laws. So these are the laws that are guiding, and then there have been a host of regulations. Again, we won't go into those details. And then we had Senate Bill 375, which is really about transportation, because as Dan pointed out, transportation is driving the majority of our climate emissions. So this was requiring all the regional transportation agencies, every state, throughout the state, there are different regional transportation agencies. Ours is called SANDAG for the entire San Diego County. So they had to create a target for greenhouse gas emissions, reductions from cars and light trucks. And it's not exactly consistent with the larger state target, but we have a per capita greenhouse gas reduction of 7% by 2020, 13% by 2035. By the way, me and the entire environmental community vehemently challenged these targets as not strong enough. But at the state level, we did not win. At the state level, the oil and gas industry is very powerful, very powerful. So these are not nearly enough. And you'll see the next slide. Some people not only protested at the hearing, sorry, that was my next slide. But there was actually, do you mind? Sorry, that's my own fault, I didn't put it in order. The next, keep going to the litigation side.
One more.
Next one. Awesome, okay. Ooh, sorry, small print here. So, some folks like me just testified, and I'm happy to say other of my friends actually sued. So San Diego is basically ground zero for climate litigation, not only in California, but the whole nation is watching what the courts are doing. So, which is pretty incredible, right? So basically Sierra Club sued the County of San Diego in 2012 because they did have an updated general plan. So who remembers when you have an updated general plan, what happens? climate plan is legally required to meet their targets, right? Which means that they have to have strategies in that climate plan that are enforceable, right? That's pivotal. So the county didn't do that. They sort of flouted the law, and we're just kind of hoping and praying and wishing that no one would notice. So of course we noticed, and we basically sued, Sierra Club sued, and they're awesome attorneys, and they won at the district level, they won at the appeals level, and the county went so far as to the Supreme Court, California Supreme Court. I'm happy to say the Supreme Court threw out their climate plan, which is hugely monumental, setting great precedent. Yeah, huge precedent. So they will be starting over, and I think the county plan it does affect and intersect with all city climate plans in the county. So everyone should know that there's precedent here, and every city in the county knows about this case. And every city is hoping you don't know about this case. So make sure you remember that the county was required to do a legally binding plan. And this was actually, this case I used to persuade, when Tug Lawyer was the mayor, that our plan also had to be legally required. So it's a point of leverage for folks when you're doing advocacy. So there's an organization called Cleveland National Forest Foundation, and they sued over the transportation targets we were just talking about. But I said, I went up and testified, and some of my friends litigated, thank God. I mean, really, it's not that litigation is your first option, but it's a tool that sometimes has to be used, and it's just one of those things. And so the trial court found that our agency, SANDAG, did not go far enough to hit these greenhouse gas reduction targets. And they had some language about failing to tie transportation funding to local climate action plans. So just like the county, unfortunately, SANDAG arrogantly appealed. So the Court of Appeal upheld the environmental position. And Supreme Court, it upheld the trial court, but it's still wanting, so it hasn't made a final decision, it's still wanting more information about whether SANDAG has to comply with an executive order. So again, I don't want to get too in the weeds, but the problem with an executive order is that it's not legislation. So it could be interpreted that it only applies to state agencies. It doesn't apply to city governments. And that's the rub. And that's what SANDAG and the county were arguing, that the executive order is not law, and they don't have to comply with it. The problem is, to me, that we're even fighting with the county or SANDAG over whether it's legally required. Because the science tells us that's the very least of what we need to do to protect our future, right? So while they're sort of fighting us in court, trying to do as little as possible to protect our quality of life, we're fighting to say that's the least of what we need to do. But, fundamentally, what's wrong with this picture? That our government isn't working to protect us. They're fighting to do the least of what they can do. So we're wasting time and resources in the court. But I'm trying to look at the bright side, which is that we're setting precedent. So it's emboldening and empowering all of you all when you're working in your cities to say, you need to do something. And also, of course, you want to say, because it's the right thing to do. It's the moral thing to do. It's the right public policy call. So going back to CEQA, that CEQA slide, again, high level, you do not need to know all the details of CEQA, but I just put it beside my rating because it is kind of surprising that we've had some conservatives, especially given where Republicans are at today on a lot of climate planning. But Reagan did sign into law this Environmental Act, which requires public agencies to examine significant adverse environmental consequences of their actions. Why it's important is it applies to general plans and climate action plans. So CEQA requires the cities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to comply with California laws and regulations. So again, that applies, and that's really important for general plans. Again, when you update your general plan, you have to do CEQA, and that's the trigger to make sure that these plans are enforceable. So I'm probably overwhelming you with a lot of this technical, legal conversation, but I just want to make sure you know that you're armed, and that there is a way for you to successfully succeed, even though you're going to get pushback. I mean, let's just put it out there. It's going to be very hard to have a straight path to success. But there are those of us who have been through this that you can always count on and rely on, and there are laws in place to help you succeed. So I think did I have a last slide on this, or is that my last slide? Oh, bottom line. So the city and the county both had updated general plans, thus We both were legally required to reduce our greenhouse gas reductions through 2050, the executive order. Other cities, again, this is just a repeat. If the climate plan is mitigation for your updated general plan, you can make sure it's legally required. If it's not mitigation for an updated general plan, because some, I can't remember, I've done a little bit of research, I can't remember, there's some city around here doesn't have an updated general plan. So the legal argument is weak, but the policy argument is strong. So again, we're happy to arm you with what you need to make those persuasive points, but it's the right thing to do and it's the right policy decision. So elected officials might say, we don't have to make it legally binding, why would we? Oh, I don't know, because I don't know the human existence is at play. I mean, there are ways to let them know that not only is it the right policy call, but that you back them up, and that you will be supporting when they make that decision to move forward with the right policy call as well. So I think that's my section right now. Awesome. Thanks, guys.